Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We have something a bit exciting and a bit different for us today, in that Frans Vermeulen and Linda Johnston are joining us this morning, and we're going to talk for, I guess, an hour or so about some of their new work, particularly with the plant kingdom. I guess Frans and Linda don't really need a lot of introduction. We know them quite well already. Frans, of course, we know very well in Australia. We've been lucky enough to have him come and present and teach here quite regularly over the last years, and of course his books are extremely well known. Most of us reach for his book as our first materia medica in our practices every day. Linda's a bit newer for us, I don't think. Linda, have you been to Australia before? I don't think you've taught here, have you?
I haven't taught there. I've toured there.
Ah, toured. Okay.
And, yes.
Okay.
So I'm well aware of what a beautiful country it is, but I'm looking forward to teaching there as well.
Yeah, nice. So Linda's a little bit newer to us in Australia as a teacher, but very well known overseas. Linda's actually been in practice and teaching for quite a long time. She was a medical doctor before becoming a homeopath in the mid-'80s, and has been in extensive practice and also a homeopathic educator since then. And I think we'll have a lot of interesting things to tell us today. So perhaps we might just simply get started. What I want to invite everyone who's listening to do, you'll notice in your program you've got a box you're able to type a question in. So if you've got a particular question that you'd like to ask Frans or Linda, please just type it in there. And if we get a chance, I'll pass on as many of those questions as I can on to Frans and Linda. If I could just add one little request, if you are going to type a question in, it may be sometime after you thought of your question that we get to ask it. So if it relates to something particular that Frans or Linda were saying, please just make sure it's a bit clear to me what it relates to, because if I don't understand it, I might have to skip that question. So I want to make sure we get to as many questions as we can. So let's get started. Frans and Linda, thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's a late start in the afternoon for you over there. Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we're really happy to be here. It's just a marvel of technology that we can sit in our own home and looking at the sun soon to be setting, and you're halfway around the world there, and the sun is same sun is going to be rising. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's impressive the things that technology can do today, especially with things like this. It's very exciting. So what I thought the interesting thing to begin with, and I don't know if everyone is aware of it, you're perhaps becoming known shortly. You have a new book that you've written together coming out in the very near future, which we'll talk about shortly. But Frans and Linda don't actually just work together. You're also a partnership, a couple, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And so I'm a bit curious if you could tell me, because I'm always interested with homeopathic partnerships. There's so many out there, really amazing, productive homeopaths, contributing fantastic stuff to our literature come from partnerships. So I'm always a bit curious how it is that you came to be in a homeopathic partnership, but also how your relationship works and how that influences the work that you're putting out and what you do there. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that to begin with.
Well, we've been married about 3 years now, and I don't really know that there was any distinctive decision to work together. It just seemed a natural compatibility. Certainly we love each other and get along well. We're married, but the working together just came organically. We both have the deep love and devotion to homeopathy, and it's our life's work and career. Yet my general expertise is more on the clinical side, and Frans's expertise needs no elaboration. He is the master researcher. So it's quite, the divisions are quite distinct. So he contributes mining the information, doing the research, collecting the data, correcting the data, making sure things are accurate, going into the original sources. And so he compiles those basic foundation works that we rely on as clinicians. And then as a clinician, I can give him feedback to how that information is used in the clinic, how what he writes then is translated into the patient talking. And that gives him feedback on how to refine what he's looking at or elaborate on the things he's writing. So in addition to having the commonalities between us, we also have different territories that we work independently that complement each other. So in fact, in working on the plant book together, those kind of individual contributions came even more distinct, and we've dubbed ourselves nicknames Frans is the collector and the corrector, and I'm the connector. So I take all the data that he has, and I take that and connect that together into seeing it as a whole patient, or seeing it as a whole totality in the patient. So all of those three different categories or duties are really complement each other and make a better product than each of us could have done individually.
It's interesting. I've only seen a bit of a preview of the plant book, so I'm looking forward to seeing some more. But it certainly seems a unique book in homeopathy in that it's written by a researcher and also by a practitioner, and caters to both of those areas really strongly in the one, I guess, one package.
Well, one of the things that we hope to bring out is that Frans Vermeulen's books have always been the bedrock that we all stand on, the materia medica, the synoptic, and this material. And yet sometimes when we see a patient, the patient doesn't necessarily talk in those terms, or there are hours and hours of dialogue from the patient, and yet there might be only a few lines that we extract to use and look up in our materia medicas. So the idea of making that bridge between the research material and the immense amount of valuable data that Frans offers, say, what does that look like in a patient? How am I going to see that? Or how do all these varied symptoms connect together to form a totality of what that patient is? And that's what my job is. So maybe I'll pass you over to Frans, and he can tell a little more about some of the things that the new plant book provides and how his research has been expanded in the plant book.
It is the idea of the plant book is to collect, connect, and correct where necessary all the plant material that we have in the materia medica, and that's by far the largest section, except for the last years when there is a sort of resurgence of animal remedies, particularly the bird remedies, which are now the largest groupings within the animal grouping. But before that, and still now, the plants make up, I think, 60% of the materia medica, and it's the largest part, and most of the old provings have been done with the plants. So the idea of the plant book is to collect everything that is available in the homeopathic literature from the beginning until now about plants, and to group that in the botanically correct groupings, not in the groupings that they had in the days of Clark and Kent and Herring, because these days are over, and so many things have changed in botanical literature and botanical knowledge that you cannot hold on to these old groupings that they had in these days. So therefore, not only the groupings have changed, but also the comparisons and the differential diagnosis. That has a big impact on the whole idea of differential diagnosis, how you're going to do that.
So as I understand it, using the APG system is the grouping system that you use, which is based on genetic testing rather than just the shape of the plants, etc. Yeah.
That's correct. And in the old literature, the North Americans used Asa Gray. That was a professor of botany somewhere from one of the American cities. I don't know where he was from, but they used his division. That was, and Asa Gray was not even Linnaean in his division, so that division is quite often off. And the APG, the good thing about the APG is that it takes in the genetic structures and the genetic data as deciding about the family divisions, and that includes then the chemical, usually includes the chemical composition of the various plants. Now in the old days that of course was not included because they hardly knew anything about it. So by using the APG, the division is much more reliable, clear, and it allows a much more accurate differential diagnosis.
Well, one of the most important parts about this, it's not just simply a matter of which division should be used, but when we are talking about plant families and assigning, let's say, family characteristics as a first cut or first step into finding the remedy, having those individual plants in their correct family is critically important. So using outdated or traditional groupings, even if the symptoms seem to be putting those plants together, isn't going to be the most accurate. So I think Frans said that something like 25 to 50% of the plants had something wrong with their grouping, their name, their identity. So there was a lot of correction to do. So what Frans has done in the plant book is make these corrections, and I'll let him elaborate more on this, so that when, as a clinician, I go to a family theme, that say some of the plant families, and we talk about 139 different plant families or groupings, each one with different themes, it's going to be, you can go to with confidence that that theme is going to be assigned to that particular family member.
It's even worse than 25. It's about 40% of the plant's name as inherited from the old sources are either wrong or need to be updated or incomplete or anything other is the matter with them. So what we have tried to find all the current scientifically accepted names to fit to the homeopathic names. That was the first step of the project. The second step was to divide them into the groupings where they currently are placed, and that's the APG system, number 3. There are 3 of them. They have been updated over the last 14 years or something. And from there, and then investigate the various members, and then investigate what that leads to, draw certain conclusions about the groupings and the themes of the grouping, and then go to the next. That was, simple said, is basically the idea of the plant book. As you can understand, 139 groupings, that will take quite some space, and it will.
And how many plants? It's something like 2,000 medicines?
2,000 something.
Yeah.
2,000 something.
Wow. Wow, that's a mind-boggling effort.
You know, we're all familiar with things like the Asteraceae with arnica and the Solanaceae with stramonium, and these kind of themes of those families are very familiar to us, and they really helped open the door to the whole idea of themes. But then you have so many other families that we don't know much about, and yet they have wonderful remedies in our materia medica. And these families, the Araceae, or well, there's hundreds of, well, dozens of them, and it's like originally having a paint box with 10 colors, but now you have 139 colors. So before, we'd say, well, we have an array of a dozen or 2 dozen plant families that we know and have themes for, and we just by general nature tend to modify or to look only at those themes and ascribe those to what we see in the patient. Well, now there's a lot more variety, and there's some subtle differences between one family and another, but each one is very distinct and has its own characteristics, so you don't have to limit ourselves to the known families that are familiar to us. There's a whole wide arena, a much larger palette, and this really opens the door to the hundreds of other remedies that don't even exist in our materia medica yet. So you can have a plant family say, I know my patient is in this family, the themes really fit, but none of the current members really fit. It opens the door to do further investigations into the other members that we don't know yet, so that the amount of accuracy and individualization becomes unlimited.
Yeah, we believe that only what is written down is available to us as homeopathic remedies. The more symptoms they have, the more we rely on it. But we tend to forget that the old materia medica is based on so-called polycrest. That means they got all the symptoms from all the others. That is, the polycrest represents not so much an individual species, it represents a whole group of related individuals. And the moment you get that idea, the moment you understand that atropine or belladonna represents a large section of the nightshades, you can, from there, you can make your differentiation based on the particular information of the patient, but might not be available in the materia medica.
Yeah. So I guess really, just to clarify that, Frans, because belladonna, being one of the earliest members of that group, so what you're suggesting is that a lot of symptoms that we've assigned to belladonna, based on our clinical experience, perhaps belong to other members of the family or represent that group rather than just because that was the closest medicine we knew back then? Is that what you mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. For instance, if you would take, well, I've said that before, but if you take Rustox, that's 15,000 symptoms, which is incredible for a small little vine that grows somewhere in the northeast of the U.S. Very limited habitat and a very small distribution it has. How can it have so many symptoms? Well, the reason is that it covers all the others as well. All the other Rus species, of which North America had at least 10, or probably even more. All these are included in Rus because in the days of Kent, did they really know the difference between one and the other? Very unlikely, and I've rather proved that they didn't. So there is a much of generalizing going on that has been included in the materia medica, and we have from that draw the conclusion that they speak about species, but they don't speak about species. They speak about generic divisions. They take groupings, and that's represented by a particular species, but it doesn't mean that is the species alone that has those symptoms. It's the whole grouping.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really not only moving into this idea of family themes, not only just plants, but animals and minerals as well, but we're moving to the idea that the specificity, the individualisticness of our remedies or of our prescriptions can be enhanced. I mean, I've been doing homeopathy for many years, and all along I was under the impression that the way I was prescribing and the materials I had, the materia medicas and so forth, were very individualistic, and you're matching the individual characteristics of the patient with the individual characteristics of the remedy. But throughout this work and through what Frans has really learned is that the older masters were much broader. They were looking at generic characteristics and not so specific about the individual plants within that grouping. And that's what we are bringing forward with the plant book to carry on the work of many other people in homeopathy now who are taking those generic characteristics or family characteristics, saying that's not enough, that's not close enough. Let's get down to the individual species of the plant that's going to be right for that patient.
And where these differences lie, that is difficult to predict. It might be just something very small. Maybe it's something in the nature of that particular plant. Maybe it's something in its appearance. Maybe it's just something that the patient himself or herself likes about that particular member of a grouping that is sufficient to go to that member of the grouping because the grouping symptoms, which you know from the family, fit. But the different members that we have of the family don't fit or are not fitting enough, let me put it in this way. So it allows a much larger area of use. If you would, for instance, look at the old days, and it's just one example of that, the classical authors were generic in the prescribing, not individual. If you would look under aloe, let me take aloe. 3 aloes. There is one from the Caribbean, there's one from South Africa, and there's one from a small island close to Yemen, up to the African coast. Now, it's generally believed that we use aloe socotrina. That is our standard type remedy in the aloe grouping. But if you would look in the classical materia medica, you will see that it is mixed with the other two. And that aloe socotrina is used for treating the symptoms that were brought up in the proving of the others. That means that they're interchangeable. There is no other answer to this. There is no other way how you can explain this. So if one of the aloes causes, for instance, the urgent urge to go to the toilet at 4 o'clock in the night and rushes you out of bed, and you can treat it in a patient who has the same symptom as one of the other aloes, then it's a generic symptom. It's not individual, right? Yeah. There are loads and loads of symptoms in the classical materia medica that explain that that was how the materia medica was constructed. Now, we may be content with that and say, well, that's good enough for us. As long as it works, fine, no problem. But if you really want to go more into the individual details, you have to accept that the materia medica won't always cover your steps, and there will be decisions that you have to make based on much smaller tidbits of information that you're used to.
What about medicines in the same family that are renowned in homeopathy for being different? Here going right back to Hahnemann's time, people were criticizing working in families, with the justification that Nux vomica and Ignatia are so different from each other. How do you understand those type of examples?
Nux vomica and Ignatia are almost brother and sister. They're very similar. They're both in the strychnus family, and one has a little bit of strychnine more than the other, and the other has a little bit of brucine, as it is called. Both are alkaloids, but brucine is just another type of strychnine. So it's just a division of the alkaloids are slightly different, yep. the proportion of the alkaloids, but they can almost be used interchangeably, almost, were it not for the fact that one is a tree and the other one is vine, is a liana, so maybe that makes a difference in the prescription. You don't know that, because this kind of things we don't really consider yet in the materia medica. We go for symptoms, but we do not go for appearances, but maybe we should. We do not go for colors. That all these kind of things are not in the materia medica, but maybe the behavior and maybe the personality, if I may call it like that, of the plant also needs to play a role in the considerations that we make. Not solely that, but as part of the considerations.
So with your work, you're looking at the kingdom, but also the alkaloids and the relationships and the other medicines in the same family. And it sounds like you're coming primarily first to a family and then differentiating it based on the smaller details after that.
Well, that's right. And one of the things that really is important when you're looking at the APG system that relies on these genetic differences. The genetic is what determines the form and the phytochemicals and all the characteristics of the plant. And so it makes sense that instead of looking at the plant and saying this one has 2 split leaves and this one also has 2 split leaves, that's enough, you go back to the genetics that is responsible for making those. And they are responsible for making the phytochemicals. And the phytochemicals, the alkaloids, the tannins, all the other things that make up the chemicals and each one's unique kind of chemicals contributions, those affect the activities and the affinities. So by seeing, I think in homeopathy for a while there we got away from the idea that there were actually physical chemical reasons for some of the things that these plants did medicinally, and said, well, we're homeopaths, we don't really look at the physical structure of the plant or what it's composed of or what its poisoning properties are. We are using the dynamic and energetic aspect of the plant. But in fact, we can't ignore that. That's a really important piece of information. Even though we're using the dynamic aspect of the plant, the chemicals and poisons and other active ingredients that are in the plant help to define what those dynamic symptoms will be. And it's a great loss in understanding that plant and the plant families in not utilizing that. Well, we do that in the plant book. We bring out those phytochemicals. Those are discussed in their affinities and what they do on an organic level coincide very nicely in most cases with the kind of proving symptoms and clinical symptoms that come out.
We also need to understand that originally and classically in the provings in the old days, there were no dynamic provings. They didn't exist. That's something of the latter years. But Hahnemann didn't potentize his remedies to make them dynamic. He potentized his remedies to reduce the toxic effects, to reduce the gross chemical aspects of the plants and the other remedies that he used, and to bring out the more individual characteristics. That was the reason. But since Hahnemann, and Hahnemann was not the only one, since Hahnemann, in the plant book I've tracked down all the provings, and I've tracked down all the manner in which the provings were done and the substances with which they were done and the potencies. I've written it all up, and the conclusion is that now 85% of the plant provings is done with the tincture. So the information is very similar to what herbalists use. But we have an added addition of the dynamic quantities, but it is not just that. There is an underlying feature of chemical components and chemical composition of the plant that decides in what direction the symptoms of the provers go. There can be no other way. If a plant is not capable of the components of a plant are not capable of passing the blood-brain barrier, you simply cannot have CNS. You simply cannot have central nervous system complaints. You cannot have that. It's simple as that. There is no other way. So if you know that a plant doesn't have those components, well, then you can predict what it can and what it can't cause. So also what it can and what it can't cure.
Well, so one of the things that we hope to bring out is really the bridge between the blind confidence in the listings that are in our repertory and really start to bring out the logical and scientific basis for what homeopathy is doing and what the symptoms are. So we do have our feet in a scientific world. We do have our feet there. And we also have our feet firmly in the idea of the dynamic quality and the potentized quality and the totality of the person. So by having both feet firmly on the ground, we're going to be much better practitioners and much more accurate. And the bottom line for all practicing homeopaths is, what is this? How is this going to help me in the clinic? How is this going to help me find a more accurate, better remedy for my patients? And that's what we really want to emphasize, that all of the information, by being much more accurately found out, and the categories very up-to-date and accurate, and every single symptom that's in the plant book is referenced, so that you know whether it's a proving symptom, a clinical symptom, who was the prover, where was the authority. And by being so meticulous, we have a firm, solid ground of reliable information that we can use with confidence. And that's how it translates into the clinic. You know that when you look at this information, it's going to be accurate and reliable.
Wow, that's incredible, really incredible.
And maybe it's time to mention that it's also 5,000 pages of accurate reliability. Yeah, in 4 volumes. And I think sometimes over the last 7 or 8 years that we've been working on this, Frans, of course, started earlier than I did. I joined the project after about 5 years of his labors, and I put in a few of my own. It really feels like we gave birth to quadruplets. So it's a long time in coming, and a lot of care and meticulous quality has put into it. Now, I should mention that one of the other features that we add into these families is I've gone through all the information from all of each member of a plant family or plant grouping, and was able to, through the symptoms and recurring themes or recurring sensations that came through in all the different provings or all the symptoms of all the members, and was able to construct what we're calling the themes and affinities, which is a narration of the theme, either the central delusion, the central conflict, the particular kind of situations or view of the world, physically, mental, and emotionally, that a person in this or a remedy from these individual families have. So the themes are elaborated based on the information collected as collectively from the grouping of the members of that family. So in addition to the phytochemicals in the group and individual members, we put forth these 139 propositions as central themes, sensations, and modalities and ideas and delusions, central idea of each of the family member. We're hoping that will be a springboard for understanding each of these 139 groupings.
Perhaps could you give us an example, Frans and Linda? Perhaps you can pick a family or a medicine and talk about what you understood based on your research and your work writing this book.
Well, let's take the palm trees. Of course, we have loads of those in California. I don't know whether you have them in Australia. I assume you have palms in Australia.
Yeah, we have lots.
Well, but we're looking at them right on the web here. Right
I don't see so many palms. Well, it's tropical enough. Yes. What do we actually know about the palm tree family? Well, we have Sabal, or however you pronounce it, Sabal cerulata, right? It's a little palm tree from Florida. But outside of that, the palm tree is one of the largest groupings in the botanical kingdom, in the plant kingdom. There are particular chemicals collected in the palm trees more than in others. And do we ever use it? Well, what we have found is by studying the various members, the materia medica is about 9 that it mentions out of the palm tree family, among others, the coconut, the date palm, an African oil palm, the sabal, and this thing that you can drink nowadays from Brazil, acai or something it's called, a bluish, dark bluish liquid. It is a sort of sports drink nowadays. Now, we have learned that the palm tree family of most other families has most to do with fatty acids. Now, fatty acids currently is a big thing, the triglycerides and cholesterol. So it may offer an answer that. We have learned that what there is originally in the Sabal cerulata, this prostate gland complaints, this female breast symptoms that are there, actually go for all of them. Once again, explaining that this Sabal is a sort of representative, an old classical representative of an idea that's underlying and that goes for more members than only the Sabal. Now, that is an example of how we have worked this out, and we give them the various examples from where it can be demonstrated that this is our family themes, the various family themes that go within the family on the chemical level, the physiological level, the mental level, and the emotional level.
And then with that information, maybe perhaps Linda could speak to this, and how the translation between Frans's work researching and taking that to the clinic and trying it with a real client sitting in front of you. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about that, Linda.
Well, one of the things that I would say is we look at what are in total, not just about the fatty acids, but when we look at the plants in total, there's other themes that come up too. Now, the fatty acids have to do with nutrition, and the kind of nutrition that fats provide is a very sustaining kind of nutrition. It's not quick acting like the carbohydrates. But in addition, we looked at the whole plant family, the whole members of the family, and there was also themes of providing solace, providing strength, energy, and endurance. I mean, that's what the fats do. In addition, there was the idea of when you have that kind of need for this nutrition, you also might have that there are going to be high demands. And you look at the nature of the plant family, it grows very high. It has very high stature. It stands firm and erect. There's dignity. So there's also the theme of regality, dignity, wisdom, and also the converse side is you bear up under one's misfortune. You stand erect in the time and dignity in the time of adversity. So those themes also came up very clearly in a lot of the plant family. So how would that show up in a patient is that they might perceive certain situations that occur in their life along those lines. Whatever is happening, whether it's picking their clothes up at the cleaners or dealing with a situation at their work, they're going to see it through that prism. They're going to use words like that I stand tall in the midst of adversity. You might hear something like that. Or I need a lot of endurance in order to maintain my dignity. That's what comes out in the plants, and that's what you would hear from the patient. So we go through and elaborate these kind of things to draw out how the patient who needs one of these remedies views the world, irrespective of the circumstances under which they are in. And they are by being in that state, they naturally would draw in situations to them that would express those same qualities.
Lovely. So we have a seminar coming up shortly. You're going to be teaching in Byron Bay the week of Friday, Saturday, Sunday, October 28, 29, 30. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit, over those 3 days, what will you be talking about? How are things going to work, and how do you teach using this massive amount of information that you've produced?
Well, what we're going to do is, over 3 days, present 3 different plant families. And we will be drawing on a lot of the information that we have in our book. But usually what happens is I will present cases that can show, here's a case, and from that case start to show the participants how we extract the themes, how you would see that totality of that particular patient, what words they're using, what themes come out. And then we elaborate through the cases that I present where you see over several cases what are the family themes that are presenting, and then also what are the individual themes that show in each case that are different from each other that help identify the individual member of that family. And then Frans will follow in with discussing the plant family and go through all the members, what are the individual characteristics of each member, as well as elaborating where the themes came from, what is it in the nature of the plants, the phytochemicals of the plants, the provings that have occurred that are the basis on which these themes are made. So we like to not really tell you at this point what plant families we're going to be doing, because it helps the participants to be in the dark when we start presenting cases, because that's what happens in the clinic.
Yeah, of course.
But the whole idea is to show so that when people open our book with plants or any of Frans's previous books and see the materia medica there, we hope through the seminar to be able to provide some templates on how to look at that material and be able in their mind to visualize what the patient would be like. So that by doing a clinical and research and clinical and materia medica together in the seminar, it's a lasting gift that down the line, anytime you look at the family themes or look at any of the other materia medicas, the patient will rise out of the pages of that data.
I wonder, perhaps this is going back to a little bit at the start of today, we were talking about your relationship in life as well as outside your work, and Frans's role as the corrector and the collector, and yours, Linda, as the connector. I wonder, in terms of the work you do with homeopathy, is there something that you disagree on, or is there something that's different between the way that you work?
Well, actually, when he empties the dishwasher, he likes putting the glasses with the lip down, and I like putting glasses with the lip up. And we just have not come to an adequate resolution of that conundrum. But
we can lay them down horizontally, but that takes more space then.
Yeah, so I think that's about all that we found so far that we disagree on. If anything, I'd have to say that we each had brought our own expertise, and Frans has opened my eyes to so many aspects of the materia medica that I blithely just accepted on face value, because I was a clinician and I just had decided early on that the materia medica was written in stone and it was accurate, and these people had all had up-to-date information, and he's really opened the world to me and seeing how much has been inaccurate, how much we took on value that shouldn't have been taken that way. In fact, it just got to the point I wondered how I ever made a good prescription at all. And I think Frans can speak for himself on the things that I've contributed to his wider understanding.
It is always the basic question. When I come with my criticism on the materia medica, the question is always, how can it work? Well, the answer is it works because it is based on generics. And that's fine enough. For a large part of our community, that's fine. And I have nothing against that. But if you want to go one step further, I believe there is a whole area which is unexplored, and that's the area of the individual and the individual prescription, which is right at the spot. It's right on the head of it. Whereas the generic hits generically. So of course it has an effect. When you prescribe one snake instead of the other, of course you will have a certain snake effect. There is no denying that. And if you're content on that level, fine. You wouldn't hear me about that. But the point is, should we be content on that level? Should we be? And I think we shouldn't. I think we can get it one step more precise and better.
You know, one way that I think about this is the difference between generic and specific. Is if you were, let's say, at a big family reunion and you have 400 people who are related to each other, and then someone stands up and says, you know, I want all the Smiths to raise their hand, and a third of the people will raise their hand. Well, and then you say, no, I want to have Mabel Smith, and you have one person raise their hand. Well, when you call for the Smiths, that's the generic. You know, there's a lot of Smiths there, and they all have something in common. They're all from that one part of the family. But when you say Mabel Smith, there's only one of them. That's the individual. So yes, you're going to get Mabel Smith in that grouping of all the Smiths, but that's not really specific or individualized. So when you ask for Mabel Smith and you get that one person, that's like going for the real specific, absolute simillimum that's going to give you the best results. And that's what we hope to advance with the kind of work we're doing. Mm-hmm. You know, it's been many times that, even in my early career too, that I thought I was calling for Mabel Smith when I was only calling for the Smiths. Many people don't realize necessarily that what they are doing is prescribing more generically, and because it gives results, they do say, well, this is good enough, not realizing that it actually is another more precise way to do things. So sometimes you don't know to improve or to reach for something better until you realize that you're not already there.
Mm. So I've just got a question from the audience. If we perhaps talk about the book for a moment. So the book's not available quite yet, I think, is it? It's not quite released.
6 weeks. We estimate 6 weeks from now.
Okay.
So by the time we come to Byron Bay, we should be it should be already available.
Yeah. Oh, for 4 volumes, you'll need big suitcases, I think. Can you bring some with you?
Indeed.
Could we just talk a little bit about the actual book itself, the structure of the book, the way the information's been set out, the way it's presented, and how we would access that in its clinical use?
It's done alphabetically in the form of groupings, which are usually plant families, so it starts with the A, blah, blah, and all the rest of it. Some of them are biological groupings like carnivorous plants, and there's another grouping I forgot the names of, will be of. And sometimes the groupings in family style were too small, so we have taken the families together in an order, which is a larger category that unites certain families together. Now, that's all done alphabetically. Then it starts with the botanical features of that grouping, and then comes the overview of all the various remedies in that particular grouping, alphabetically done, with the abbreviation as it is in the repertory, the number of symptoms that you can find there, so that you can quickly see whether it's in vain that you're going to look for it in the repertory, yes or no, and whether there's anything known homeopathically in terms of materia medica language of a particular remedy. You can right away see that. Then we start describing the features of the family in terms of emotional and mental and behavioral and all the various aspects, the chemical aspects of the family.
Mythological, historical.
Anything available and anything that would help to get an idea of where this particular grouping is about. Then there is, as Linda said, there is a sort of summarizing overview, and below that there is a listing of the various themes numbered, and that includes the affinities for which the particular grouping feels most, CNS, gastrointestinal, respiratory, whatever. And then the various members of the groupings are one by one discussed with the materia medica, if they have one, and the botanical features and all the other features, and that sets them apart from the family. That's how it is done.
Mm-hmm. And just a question we had from someone else, geographical information. If you look at, perhaps, are Australian plants different than American plants?
Definitely. In the botanical features, there is a division there. It says what the native range is, so where you can find them. And then the habitat is there, so where you can find them in the native range. you will see, of course, there are cosmopolitan plants that have been planted all over the world, have been introduced in all the various continents, or have spread themselves all over the place. But you will also see that our whole materia medica, the 2,000 plants and all, most of it is Eastern North America and European. It's not so much Australian. Why not? Because the animal didn't live there. So it is Asia. But they are part of our materia medica, but usually they will not be the type remedies. They usually will not have the bulk of the symptoms. They will either be European or Eastern North American. But it is easy to just draw the line to your Australian species just by knowing what family it fits, and then just include that as part of the family theme members.
I mean, there's so many sources of information when we talk about a plant family. There is mythology, there's historical use, eclectic uses, there's where it shows up in literature, what it's been used of traditionally. Any aspect of where that plant comes, or any of the plant members come in our lives from now till many years ago, all of these things have something to do with the characteristic or the relationship people have had with that plant, and all of that information has been useful in understanding where that plant belongs and what its nature is.
For instance, we have 3 bryonias. If you would check up your listing of the bryonias, you will find 3. There's alba, dioica, and the third species name I forgot. But the first 2 are from Europe. The third one is from Australia. But hardly anyone will know it. But the fact that it is very similar to the others would actually allow you just replace the European bryonia with the Australian one.
And there may very well be some little minor characteristics, because living in Australia is different than living elsewhere. And so there may be some adaptation or something that happened in that plant that's going to be manifest in the way it acts in the patient. And that may make a more accurate prescription.
Or it's simple as that. The patient loves that plant, hates it, is allergic to it, collects it, whatever. These links are not just symptomatic always. That points out that there can be a confirmation in something that's not symptomatic at all.
Well, and another thing that I should mention is that you really have to have a bit of courage to go out on the limb, because we do have our basic materia medica, and we do have remedies that you can really put your feet firmly on the ground. You could give Bryonia alba, and you know that there's all those thousands of symptoms in the materia medica. But if it doesn't quite work, or it's only marginally effective, and it doesn't quite give what you want, you have to have the courage to say, is there another species in Bryonia? Or is there another plant, lesser known member in this larger family? And even if there's only 2 or 3 lines in the materia medica, or conversely, if there's no information whatsoever and all you have is botanical information, you have to have the courage to strike out and say, no, I'm going to try this. The results I'm getting aren't quite exactly what I want. They're not satisfactory. Let's move on to these other areas. And you know, I've been doing that more and more, as have many of my colleagues, and some experiments fail, and others really provide amazingly fantastic results that by having a little courage, using the methodology, keeping our feet firmly on the ground, and yet taking a little bit of that risk to move further, can really pay dividends.
That's indeed the courage that Linda has to a tremendous degree. It's admirable how far she dares go in that, because we are taught so much that we have to rely on what is written in the materia medica, and that it is solid and we can rely on it. It's all based on provings, etc. It's proven over and over again, many clinical cases, blah, blah, and all that. So we are not used to work in the dark. We are not used to walk into a room where it is still dark and we don't know where the light switch is. But if you realize that the old materia medica is not what we think it is, we have to realize that even with the solid information that we have, and there is a lot of solid information, we are walking in the dark. We always walk in the dark. That's part of our profession. So that cannot be solved in any other way than having the courage to do things which you believe are right.
Yeah, fantastic. That's so I'm incredibly excited. I'll be waiting 6 weeks and 1 day, and I'm at my bookshop waiting for a copy of my book, please.
Well, you better allow about 7 or 8 inches wide there.
Okay.
It also comes in a beautiful box,
Yeah.
so all 4 volumes fit in a beautiful box set. And you know, our hats are off to our publishers, Salty Publishers, who've done the Herculean task of preventing over 2 million words that we've written and taking that off computer disk and turning it into the beautiful, useful book that we have. It has beautiful paper, easy to read font, and you know, these aren't just aesthetic considerations. It makes a big difference in how the book is easy to use and opens flat, and it's easy to read and get the information. So we really have to applaud our publishers for doing such a magnificent job.
Great. So I guess we will all look forward to seeing you in Byron Bay in a couple of weeks' time. So October 28, 29 and 30. If anyone's not registered for that seminar yet, there's still some spots available. You can see details on naturopathbyronbay.com.au. That's the Remedy Room's website for Ren Dubois, who's organising the seminar. If you can't find your way there's a link and details on my site also, naturalhealingsoftware.com. So I guess we'll look forward very much, Frans and Linda, to seeing you then. Thank you very much for joining us this morning and telling us that amazing information. And I guess we're all looking forward to seeing the book and seeing you very shortly in Byron Bay.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Thank you, everyone who joined us this morning, and we'll chat soon.